What's up, guys? Peter here. I'm here today with Andrew Huff and Chris McKechnie, and we are going to be talking about a new movie that's coming out called Connor, Webtective, and it's a feature-length film. It should be launched by the time we air this episode, and I'd encourage you guys to go check it out. But let me introduce my guests here. We got Andrew Huff. He's the director over at Huff Media Productions, and Chris McKechnie, cinematographer extraordinaire, CEO of Content with Truth. Andrew, could you just give us an intro, introduce yourself, and just tell us what you do day to day?
Yeah, so I am a director, I'm a writer. I really do a lot of different things when it comes to media production. But my wife and I started our company back in 2021. I have a background in ministry and was working for a media company down in Texas for a while. But really, our heart for trying to create better entertainment for families came from us having a family and struggling to find entertainment that we could all enjoy together that was not filled with things that we didn't approve of or didn't believe in. And so we just started to kind of around the 2020 year, we just felt this darkness kind of creeping in on children's entertainment in particular. And it's one thing if like people like kind of try to throw things at me or my wife and like we're mature and can kind of handle, different viewpoints or maybe inappropriate things or whatever. Once they started trying to do that with our children, it was kind of like, time out. Like I can't stand for that. And so we basically started our company with a focus on trying to get to the point of creating original content. Of course, that's really hard to do. And so we mostly find ourselves working commercially to support ourselves. But we're really excited to be making this transition right now into launching our first original feature film that we've kind of broken all the rules to get to because a lot of why that entertainment was headed that direction, or you were seeing a lot of that crop up in entertainment over the last decade, is because you're almost forced to do it. Otherwise, you don't get your thing made. So that's kind of a quick background on us and kind of how we got to where we are. So my wife is a producer and an actress, and we do this together. We do it out of our home and kind of don't take no for an answer. So.
I love it. Yeah, that's a great attitude. Super cool. Well, I'm thankful for the work that you guys are doing, Andrew. And I know, it, just from a family perspective, also leading a family, like that's something I always want for my kids, and my wife and I too. So I'm just thankful that you guys are in that. And yeah, Chris, can you just give us a brief intro on yourself? What do you do every day,
Sure.
and why you do it?
I do it because the Lord has called me to do it. I've been behind the camera. I grew up with my dad's video production company. Ever since I was 8, I've been on set, and so sort of like self-taught in that regard. And yeah, I did the Hollywood lifestyle of, commercials and feature films, and little did I know it was the Lord calling me to do faith-based work, content creation. And so, yeah, it's been a journey for sure, day by day, just continuing to surrender, what the Lord is calling me to do. And so now I really make it a priority to work on faith-based content. I still do some secular stuff, kind of being a dolphin in a sea of sharks, because we're supposed to be disciples wherever we're at, right? And so continuing to shine the light in the areas of darkness too. So I think the Lord has put me in uncomfortable situations where I have had to step out in my uncomfortability and say something, or it's words have power, right? And so but yeah, I love what I do. It's not a job, and yeah, it's fun. So especially now leaning into what I feel the Lord has called me to do, in terms of just spreading the love of Jesus through media and through film. So
Yeah, I'm just personally always encouraged by you online specifically. I think you've kind of just taken upon yourself to share your journey a lot, maybe publicly, and so whether it's through Facebook or whatever, but just hearing the journey that you've been on in this, I think for me it was almost like a year ago or maybe more, but Just like finding you online for some reason. I don't know how we got connected, but just like hearing the ways that God has used you and your faith, and then leading your family through that. All sorts of crazy. I mean, you guys just had like a rat in your RV or something like that. Like all sorts of crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Like just the wildest adventures. But I've been glad, personally encouraged that you've shared it. I think it's kind of one of my main things and what I'm doing currently as a filmmaker. I'm trying to share these stories and make it known what God is doing in our lives, because He's always at work. But sometimes we don't share it. So. Let's talk about the movie coming up here. So Andrew, I'm going to start with you. There's a question for you. So let's start at 30,000 feet level kind of talk here. Most faith-based films struggle with being too preachy or too subtle. So kind of like leaning one way or the other. And it sounds like you guys are trying to create a film for the unchurched that Christians could also love. But before you wrote a single line, what was the core human problem, or just kind of like this universal sort of problem that you knew the story had to solve? Kind of speak into that.
Yeah, well, let me give you a quick background on the movie, and this is really brief. That the movie is actually a continuation of a web series that we did, and so this was we started in 2020. It took a couple of years to kind of get the series, what we at that point called season 1, kind of completed and out. So 8 episodes, a really mini episodes kind of thing of a web series that leaned much heavier into teaching Christian doctrine to children. Because one of the things that so with my ministry background, one of the things that I'm super passionate about is trying to help anybody, no matter their age, go deeper into Scripture. Because I think sometimes the mistake can be thinking that, a child or a youth can't go very deep. We have to keep everything sort of surface level. And I don't think that's true. The doctrine of the Christian faith is something that people can understand, maybe not necessarily like the same way that they might understand it as they grow older, but we should still be introducing some of these things. And so I was really passionate about that in ministry, and passionate about it now. So the series was about 8 episodes of doing that, and kind of a little curtain back on the Christian film or Christian media industry. It is extremely hard to be profitable as a company doing this kind of thing, and it is almost impossible on the streaming side. And so we wanted to do a season 2 and continue telling these stories, but really started to struggle with how we would raise money to do it, knowing that likely what it would be people donating and not expecting a return, or anything like that. And us not making anything on the back end either. And so kind of coupling that with what I also started to see the pivot or not pivot, but the gap that was going to be created in theatrical release this year due to the strikes that happened a couple of years ago. We were like, hey, economically, it makes more sense for us to maybe target theaters. And then what you kind of have to couple that with is knowing what once you have that in mind, like it was like, oh, theaters could be economically the right place to go to. You also have to think about what the theater is, right? And so
right.
I just love movies, and I love movies. I grew up
same.
Yeah. But we grew, and you're probably the same as me, and Chris probably the same. We grew up really in the peak 80s and 90s, like just some of the greatest. You go back and look at movies that were released. You look at 1993, and it's like, here's the movies that were released. You're just like mind blown that so many great movies came out in a single year, because it doesn't seem like that anymore. And so, so I really was thinking about like what the theatrical experience is, and there's the element of, sometimes people will say, oh, that's a movie for the big screen. And what the industry means by that is they put a big star in it.
Right.
Or they spend a lot of money on it, versus what the theatrical experience actually is it's a community experience. It's everybody getting together and enjoying the experience. And so, to be honest with you, and I hate to say it this way because it sounds like I'm kind of slamming other Christian films. But our first and foremost priority with this movie was that it would be enjoyable, that you would smile coming out of the theater, because um, that's what it's for us. Like, we just want, we're a family that loves to have fun. We play board games together, and we,
Yep.
joke together. And that was the family I grew up in as well. And that's what I seek, is just moments of joy as a family that we're experiencing together, and kind of laugh about, quote movies together, that sort of thing. And so that was the way that I think, to be honest with you, it's almost a little bit subconscious of us aiming at trying to create something that, yes, Christians, I personally think Christians are going to absolutely eat up and love. But at the same time, and I've had people tell me this, non-Christians may actually still even respond to, because at the end of the day, what our goal was to create joy and to create enjoyment, and
Yeah.
to entertain. To me, that's what the theatrical experience is for. If you're sort of looking at your phone, like wondering when it's going to be over, then you've probably not done a good job of creating a good theatrical experience.
Yeah, I think we've all been in or seen Christian movies where you're kind of like, okay, this is, yeah.
Yeah.
The early ones, I call them the early ones. I think it's in a good spot currently, like, honestly, with just like groups like Angel Studios or others, where you're kind of mainstreaming a lot of stuff now. It's there, quality wise. So that's awesome. Chris, can I ask you kind of a question? So when it comes to supporting that sort of vision for this, what kinds of things were you initially thinking, as far as visuals, colors, lighting, movement? Like, how did you kind of seek to translate that into kind of a visual language? Was there any kind of styles or things that you pulled inspiration from to get it to that spot?
Yeah, I think as a cinematographer, I'm always learning each and every day, like, watching content, and because I love watching content. And so I think, Andy and I have been working together 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah, it's longer than 6, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
7
So
or 8.
Wow.
he and I have a good rapport on set. And obviously I helped like generate the look for the series. And then we kind of like just elevated that for the movie. Because what's funny is that during the series, I was wanting to go more like dramatic and where the movie is, right? And he's like,
Mhm.
well, let's keep it like, because it's, a kid's series, and,
Right.
for,
Kind of
there was
lighthearted.
other things at play. But so like for the movie, it's like, oh, this is my like wheelhouse. This is where I love to be. And so, yeah, I think, he would say, oh, it's, this scene, and we talk about it and block it and everything. And then, the cool thing, I like spaces. And so it takes a little bit longer to get there, and when, in the initial like lighting. But once we get to that moment where the space is lit, then it's just very subtle tweaking for the close-ups and stuff. And so we can move pretty quickly. And so I've taken that mindset of like, try to light the space, see what the space is naturally doing, because then we accelerate through very quickly, and so we're able to make all of our days, and we're able to get the coverage. I know he didn't get every single shot that he wanted, but I think we did a good, like, we did a decent job of capturing the stuff. And the Ronin 40, which is what the movie was shot on, it saved us, from time to time, because we'd be able to do, oh, we're just going to do it as a oneer,
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever. And so, like, there are those things, like, there's the right tool for the right job. And this one was a smaller budget. And so having a tool that was more versatile just helped, as opposed to laying dolly track, or even setting up like a Dana dolly, or doing Steadicam, or bringing, a Steadicam day player in for a day. That's a lot of money. And so, like, okay, we could just sort of do like a gimbal system of some sort. And so, yeah, just kind of talking through all those things in pre-production, to really spend the time in pre-production, because it saves you on the back end and during production. The more time you spend in those phases just really save you on the back end, in terms of like when you actually get to shooting and then post-production. So
Yeah.
And let
I
me
don't know if
add
that
real
really answered
quick.
your question. It probably didn't.
Well, let me
So,
A lot of
add, because
nuggets, a
I
lot of
think,
nuggets.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll add this. What I do think is so great about Chris and why his cinematography is so amazing with the film is that the way he's also approaching it is from a story perspective, is from a visual perspective, and kind of the unspoken reality, I think, in modern filmmaking, and you see this a lot more in studio pictures. Indies tend to still kind of get it right. Is so much of it is designed around trying to account for every possible thing, and not just from and I'm talking about non-story elements, like account for
Okay.
marketing and account for
Yep.
visual effects. That's a big one. Accounting for visual effects means that often the reason everything looks so flat nowadays is because they shoot it flat because it gives them the most versatility later,
Right. Yeah.
because they're half the shots CGI anyway, And so that's what's so cool about Chris is that, we go into it and we actually are story and visual first, and tone and what are we trying to communicate? And there's sort of the old joke, fix it in post kind of thing, which happened on this film as much as it happens on any other film, or project. But at the end of the day, I think the benefit of having that as the initial approach is that our movie feels alive, and it feels deep, and it feels real, and it
Yeah.
feels big and exciting all at the same time, and colorful, and you don't get that unless it's intentional. And
Right.
so, and he's probably doing it subconsciously maybe at this point, but that's
yeah, I just don't
that's
even
the
think
value
about
Chris brings to the.
I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, how long have you been behind a camera? For a long time, right?
So I started when I was 8, learning with my dad. In terms of like being a cinematographer, I remember, so it was back when I was in California, and then I worked a job with I was producing and DPing, and I hired a gaffer that I had worked with all the time. And it was like a Nissan commercial or something. And he was like, well, you could call yourself a DP now. And I'm like, oh, because he had been in the industry this gaffer been in the industry for a long time. And so I was like, oh, that was like just a strong compliment, like that I was like, I truly like accepted. And I always remain humble, right? In terms of like, I'm still learning. And by no, like, I think every person on the crew is just as important as me or Andy or whomever, right? And so,
Yep.
like, that's the one thing I think what a lot of productions don't do on set is have fun. And so I think that that's where, like, if you're laughing, you get more out. If you're having fun, collectively, everyone is more willing to put forth a better effort. And so if you're going a little bit longer before lunch, or if you stay up 15 minutes or whatever, like, there's just this like a community and a team that I think a lot of productions miss out on. And it's very like, oh, you can't do that or touch that or whatever, right? And so it's like, hey, we're all here for the same thing, like to make this movie. So why can't we have fun doing it, And so,
Right.
but yeah.
Andrew, do you see that as like a critical part of making it? Because that could tie into kind of the vibe of this movie as well, just like this fun kind of thing. Like, is that important to you as far as even just this movie specifically?
Yeah, well, for the movie for sure, but to be honest with you, I'd even take it beyond that, even to life and spirituality in general.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a big, I was a huge Star Wars fan.
Yep.
I'm kind of hoping that in eternity we all get spaceships and mine can look like the Millennium Falcon. But I just am like, there's something about adventure and excitement and even danger to a degree that I feel like is a part of us and a part of creation and a design, because uh, movies like Lord of the Rings resonate so deeply with people because of the bigger world that it presents, and this idea that like there's adventure and there's danger and there's just this world that's bigger than you, and leaning into that and going, hey, that's actually real. We are a part of a big cosmic world that, we serve a big cosmic God, and he's not a boring God. Like, and I think that's it right there. I mean, my wife and I talk a lot about this, which is like, to us, Christianity and serving the Lord is fun, and it's exciting, and it's deep, and it's intelligent, and it's all of these things. And we hate it when Christianity is presented as like this sort of like, oh, you know,
Almost like a
everybody,
Hallmark
it's just,
movie.
yeah.
Right.
Or the common, idea of like heaven being like, wearing a white robe and playing a harp. And it's like, it's so much more than that. And so especially getting kids to engage with the idea that, and this is one we talk about a lot, just even in our own personal involvement in a church community, is the Bible's fun. The Bible's actually a fun, rich, like, it's exciting, and kids can tell, right? Kids are the ones that can tell, like, they're going to be turned off immediately if it's something that's boring. And I think it's kind of easy for us to be like, oh, well, you think it's boring because you just play video games all day. And it's really not that. It's that, no, life is supposed to be exciting. And so we need to communicate that. And Chris was kind of saying this with his sort of, how, the previous question, what he was saying is that that having fun while you're making it is also a big part of that, because I think, to Chris's point, he said this, right? It's like, I think you can tell when they weren't having fun making the movie as you're watching the movie, because that fun and that energy, it's not just about getting the best out of people when that's the case. That energy comes through the scene, and so it just creates this, like, for the audience, we're allowed to have fun. This is actually like a fun thing, and we can laugh, and we can. And our lead actress, Geely Gould, who is just a phenomenal talent, she says the same thing as we do, where if she as her character, who's a Christian in the film, can show that Christianity is fun, it's not boring, that says a lot to a kid. Because probably, I mean, let's be honest, and I think, for those of us who have kids, we're sort of really sensitive to this. There's a lot in terms of Christian media that doesn't do a very good job of communicating that Christianity is fun.
Yes. Amen. Amen. I wish there was like a new wave of VeggieTales-ish kind of stuff, because I feel like, for me at least, growing up, that was like this, fun sort of series, but it's not super fresh anymore. So I don't know. Okay, cool. Let me talk just about kind of the central message. I know there's a key scripture that Chris kind of talked about in a conversation with me prior to this podcast, but so the central message in this kind of seems to dive deep into the Philippians 4:13 sort of theme, and not really as like a Superman sort of verse, like I can do all things, but more of a talking about like our endurance in doing all things through Christ's strength. So how did you guys protect that specific kind of truth within this whole sort of series? How was that kind of like a key guiding point for you guys throughout this whole series, or throughout the whole feature?
Yeah, so I as I mentioned before, like, I'm really passionate about helping kids understand that Christianity is deep, the scriptures are deep, God is unfathomable, meaning like you can't get to the bottom of understanding God, which is part of my personality is such that brings me comfort. It may scare some other people, but I like it when God's too big for me to comprehend. So, because that means he's got it. Right. And that was a big driving point in the series as a whole, was making sure that when we approached anything out of scripture, that we're approaching it in a way that's not just cherry picking, because that's what tends to happen is, so, you kind of made the joke about Philippians 4:13 not being a Superman verse. And it's like, but a lot of people take it that way. So,
totally.
And so the biggest thing for me was, or the biggest sort of bigger overarching driving force behind everything we were doing with the .Connor brand is to say, okay, it's not probably what you've heard before, because if you, in the right context, you're actually going to understand the deeper idea behind it. And so for the movie, a big a big uh, aspect of the movie was making sure that yes, that is going to be sort of Dot's going to understand what that verse means, but she's going to understand it in light of what's true.
Right.
Meaning,
Yep.
and there's probably one of the best scenes in the entire movie is a conversation with her and her father, where he helps her understand that by going, well, did you read the verse prior? Which she didn't. She just looks at the one verse. Well,
Right.
you go read the
Yeah.
verse prior, and the verse prior is setting that up, because what Paul is saying is it's through every single instance I can get through those things because of Christ's strength. And so it's not about like, oh, you can do anything you set your mind to, which
Right.
could be the
No.
more
Yeah.
sort of surface level thing that you might hear. But I will also add this, and then Chris, I don't know if you've got something you want to add to sort of these ideas too, but the one of the bigger writing challenges and writing, one of the things you kind of have to lift and make sure that you're doing well as a writer is we also needed to have that couldn't be the verse didn't come first, is what I'm saying. Like, I didn't pick out Philippians 4:13 and go, okay, I'm going to write a whole movie around this.
Right.
What came first is Dot's dad's missing, and she knows he's missing and he's in trouble and he needs her help, and he's left clues and she's got to go discover these clues, but it's going to be a challenge because this is bigger than anything she's done. And so the real world problem always comes first, because then what I'm trying to do is have that be a real character, have that be a real person, because that's going to be what connects it, rather than me go
Yes.
try to force fit a story into, or force fit the story into the message I've already created. Is, well, what's the natural, again, this makes it sound like I'm slamming other Christian movies, but I believe that anything you can come up with in terms of a story, there is going to be a scriptural parallel to, or
Yeah.
something in scripture that's going to speak into that. Doesn't matter. So you can almost imagine any story and start there and still find the scriptural
Yep.
theme and message and all that kind of stuff that can be woven into it. And so it started there. Dot's going to have the hardest thing she's ever done, and it's beyond her. And so, she wants to, but the character is the type of person that's like wanting to always be in control of things and always wanting it to work out the way she wants it to work out. So that just kind of naturally then led me to, what if it's completely out of your control? Like, you can't control it. What happens then? What's sort of the scriptural thing to lean on? So anyway.
Yeah. So Chris, in creating like visuals and stuff like that, how do you create a supporting visual for this kind of theme? Like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Like, how does that filter any of your decisions in all of these things?
I think it's more of how I act on set, because that's first and foremost, right? Before you're even creating anything, it's how you are to the team around you. And so obviously it's a huge thing for me, like before I go on any job, like I'm praying about it specifically, even if it's faith-based. Lord, am I supposed to do this, right? And so before anything, like camera to the scene, like it's remaining humble and saying, Lord, like this, it's all for your glory. Like I'm just the tool that you're using. And so I owe it all to God, like in terms of where my career has gone, where it's been, and just the growth that I've had personally. It's amazing. And so like in terms of creating the look, Andy and I are very similar in terms of like what we like. And so it's easy to create like a world where obviously Andy is like my direct client, right? For directors, the cinematographer's direct client in that regard. And so like having a relationship where we could bounce ideas off of one another, or I say, hey, what about this? Or he says, oh no, let's try this. And, we have this symbiotic relationship where communication is key across every job, right? And so I think just setting the day right, setting like, hey, this is a faith-based film, guys, like, and so like prayer and just like, I don't know. It's,
Wow.
I don't know that I'm necessarily like, I and like Andy was referencing earlier, I sort of like don't think about it like in terms of like, oh, how it's sort of just again, I owe it all to the Lord. Like it just
Right.
I just
Yeah.
like say, hey, grip and electric, let's set these lights here. Let's do, after talking with Andy, and then it just, oh, it looks great.
Right.
Obviously I've
Yeah.
learned through the years, like what some stuff doesn't work, but then I'll still try stuff. Right. And you have to challenge yourself. Like, oh, let's try this. Ooh, that didn't work. Okay. Let's change it. Right.
Yep.
Or whatever. Yeah. It just kind of, it just goes again. I don't know that
Well, I'll give you
well,
two. Let me say these two things. One, and this is just a quick kind of aside, little joke thing. Making a film is kind of also enduring hard things and needing to lean on
Yeah.
Christ's strength.
yeah.
it's a marathon.
So
Yeah.
in some ways, Chris was living out the themes of the story and the scriptural ideas of it. We can make a movie a low budget through Christ, through Christ's strength. But the second thing I would say is, and again, this goes to the thing he sort of does subconsciously, which to him, he'd probably be like, oh, well, that's just normal filmmaking. But I do think in the Christian industry in particular, there's a bit of a hesitancy to really lean into um, allowing things to sort of, he referenced this earlier on the series where I kept sort of pushing him away from like making things dramatic, in order to like reflect what we were doing. Whereas leaning into the dramatic way of it, not feeling like you kind of have to flood a space with light, as a for instance, allowing Chris, if it's a tense moment, to be able to reflect that in the visuals, reflect that in sometimes that can be a little scary because what you don't want to do is alienate your audience. And so you can kind of feel like if it's too intense, that might alienate the audience. And I think that's typically the fear. And so what I would say is Chris isn't afraid of pushing it, which I think is where that starts to help something, because and that's where that relationship comes in, because if he pushes too far in one direction that I feel like, oh no, that may not be, then it's this like back and forth. But that his pushing helps me not be afraid either, to go, okay, let's let the tension breathe there. Let's create a little suspense there. It's not bad. It's not bad to have your audience sort of tense up a little bit or catch their breath in something, because if that's a part of what you're doing in the story, then it helps. It doesn't hurt. But I think it's super important, kind of as Ethan just mentioned, that starts at the beginning, because if it's not there at the beginning, and that's not where everybody's heart is, it becomes way more of a battle, and harder to kind of get to the final image. And again, I can say this, people need to go judge it for themselves. The cinematography is off the charts in this movie. So anyway.
Well, thank you. Team effort. Again, goes back to the team. Everyone's there, right? I mean, even PAs, so yeah, it's a team effort. I always try to, because you never know, this is a tip right here. You never know if that PA is going to become the next, I don't know, who's a big time, I'm so bad with names, but like next big time director. What?
The next Andrew Huff.
The next Andrew Huff, yeah. So again, like I've gotten so much work just from treating crew right, and like, hey, how are you guys doing? You guys good? Like, because if I'm ahead of a department, I want to make sure everyone under me feels like I'm leading them well, and they're enjoying it. Not that every job is like cupcakes and rainbows, because it's not, right? But if the testament of any production company is, as one job or one benefit of being freelance, is you could decide who you want to work with. Like if I worked with Andy on the first time and I was like, oh, it was a horrible experience, I wouldn't want to ever work with him again, right? But we have so much fun, and I think anybody on the crew would gladly come back, because we had so much fun. And that's just a testament to what Huff Media Productions is doing and how they run their sets. It's different, right? Because I've been on the other end of it, where it's like, it's so almost like military-ish, regimental, like, and everyone's just cussing. It's like, what are we doing? And I'm so glad the Lord plucked me out of that, and gave me a different mindset. So
Chris, let me just ask you one more kind of cinematic sort of style question or toolkit question. What? So I mean, there's certain like look and feel to everything. And you kind of talked about this a little bit before, but kind of what were some of your go-to tools for this? Like what? How did you use the camera specifically selection to kind of match the feeling that you guys are looking for? Um, what kinds of lighting did you guys always keep coming back to? Like what kind of were the signature things for this project, as far as just the tools that you used,
Yeah.
and the choices that you made to make those tools, your options?
Yeah, like mentioned before, the 4D, and Andy and I were talking about it like, hey, this thing is going to save us money because we don't have to have, not that I don't like having a big team, but like it's going to speed us up because we're able to, like, either the camera's on sticks or the camera's moving, and it's just like that easy, right, in that regard. And so, right tool for the right job. I
And
love
it's still a good, and
Venice.
it's still a good camera though. Like
Well,
you
yeah,
weren't
absolutely. I mean, here's the
you
other
weren't
thing.
skimping on it, you know.
Yeah, it's not like quite honestly, like I think people get caught up, and I'm very much guilty of this too, like the gear. And yes, the Alexa Mini LF and, Venice 2, like those are great cameras for sure. But like you can take something that is a fraction of that cost and still get something that is halfway decent, right? Because no one's going to be able to tell the difference. Your end viewer in even if it's screened theatrically, is not going to be able to tell the difference between, oh, I think that was shown on the FX3 versus like an Alexa Mini. I mean, they're not going to be able to do that. It's more for like, I feel like, and Andy and I talk about this all the time. Like, we make movies, and we need to keep this mindset. Like, we're making the movie for the end viewer, not for our film buddies, right? And so, but like in the filmmaking community, we're so critical of one another. Oh, I would have shot on this, or I don't like this. I mean,
Right.
that's just the nature of what online is, right? Most
Yeah.
people comment to complain about something, not sing praises, right? And so it's much like leaving a review, right? People go to complain versus, and so I think this mentality or mindset of people nowadays is like, oh, we just voice our complaints and not praises. Um, but yeah, so the 4D came into play, obviously. I always shoot on vintage glass because cameras are so sharp, inherently sharp today. And so everyone's trying to have to like degrade the in post, right? To add filtration, to add, grain, to add all bloom,
Right.
halation, all these things, right? Because the sensors are so sharp. No one looks good in 4K, 6K, 8K, 12K, 17K. I mean, seriously, like yeah, so
So,
I'm
so,
a
so, so, so in filming a female lead role, was that part of it too? Like you don't want to make the skin too sharp,
Well,
all
she's
the different
young, and
things.
so her skin's great, but like, no,
Yeah.
it's more about making it like, so with vintage glass, it's lower contrast. And so you have just it's sort of like a perceived dynamic range increase. It's not increasing your dynamic range, but it's sort of like, it's just like a softer gradation. And it takes the digital harshness of the high resolution sensor, 6K sensor, and it just takes the digital edge off. And we were also shooting through DFX2, which is the digital effects, Tiffin digital effects 2 filter. Just again, another layer where it's not like wiping contrast. It just not like a black magic or not black magic, oh my gosh, oh my god, the black pro mist. It's not like a pro mist
Yeah.
where it's like wiping
Right.
contrast.
Yeah.
It just takes the digital harshness off of skin. And then obviously through post and the color pipeline I added grain, just, but I didn't have to do much because it already had a softer look. Again, everyone's trying to replicate film without having the increased budgetary costs of shooting on 35. And so, yeah. And then in terms of lighting, most of the stuff that we used was nan light. I always try to light from outside. Anytime you can light from outside and shoot light through, it's going to feel more natural because you're lighting from outside. And so
Right.
anytime I would power, strong nan lights through, and do like soft hob where the light's hitting off of them harder and softer. And so again, anytime you can light from the outside, that's sort of like a tip and trick, just like you should. It doesn't matter how powerful the light is, if you can light from outside, then yeah.
I remember the first time I ever heard that, that tip light from outside, I was like, whoa. That makes sense.
Game change. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
But
it
it's
makes a
definitely
difference.
not it's definitely not your first choice when you're a beginner. You're usually just putting a light as close as you can to their face and like, all right, it's gonna look good, right?
Because you have
It's like,
one or two lights, and then you have to
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. Cheap lights are not very powerful. So the final line of the film is the truth is out there, or one of the final lines. We just got to go find it, right? So for the filmmaker or for the church leader listening to this right now, what is the truth that you hope they go out and they find in their own storytelling after hearing this? What is that?
Yeah, so another line that is said earlier in the film that's kind of a tie into that is Dot mentions going to the source of all truth, which is the scriptures. And one of the big things that is present throughout the series and then throughout the film as well is we really, really encourage kids to seek out answers to the questions they have, especially when it comes to God. And I go back to what I was saying before about how deep God is. One of the things that I harp on when I'm leading a youth group or something like that is, um, you, you cannot, you won't find you won't ask a question that God cannot answer kind of thing, where
Yep.
you are going to, it doesn't matter how much you test it, it's always going to stand up. And that's honestly a big part of my own personal testimony as well of continuing to grow in this relationship with the Lord, is that I sort of crossed early on a threshold for myself where I just kept finding answers. And it was one of those things where it was like, well, okay, I'll keep going then. Because if
Yeah.
I keep discovering the answers and things are lining up and making sense and are logical, and there's an answer to that and there's an answer to that. And it's not to say that, you'll understand everything in this life. And I think that's what I really want church leaders to be able to do. And this is even beyond the film, and beyond their engagement with what we're doing. I think this is what a lot of church leaders should do, which is,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you need to go investigate it for yourself as well. Because if those kids are asking the questions, it's great if you're able to provide those questions. There are going to be questions a kid asks that maybe you go, man, I don't know. We're going to have to find that out together. And that's okay. But it's kind of hard to answer a kid's question about God or about the scriptures or about these deep matters if you as a church leader, and when I say church leader, by the way, I'm not even just talking about pastors. I'm even talking about,
Staff,
small group
anybody,
leader,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Volunteer small
Yep.
group leader, in a youth ministry is going, hey, you need to know it. How deep are you in it? And to be honest with you, even as a filmmaker and as a writer, um, I I took a path through ministry to get to where I am now. And I look back on that and I go, I know what that was for, because I'm a better filmmaker and a better storyteller because I followed the Lord and I was called into ministry for a time. And it's primarily because what storytelling is, and this is storytelling not just in the fictional sense of what we're doing, but I think even too when you're telling the story of like, say a testimony in your church or something like that. What it is trying to present what is true about the world and what's true about creation, true about God, and true about mankind. And that is what you're trying to accomplish. And you can always tell, this is kind of my criticism of modern entertainment, is it doesn't resonate, and everyone feels like it's kind of slop. And the reason it is because it's coming from a worldview that isn't true. And
Wow.
everything that's seeped into those stories, because it's coming from a worldview that isn't true, is going to ring hollow. And it's so foundational that sometimes it's even, I think, hard for people to realize that that's what's happening, right? Is that
Yeah.
person that has bought into lies, and those lies are now coming through the stories they're telling, and then that story doesn't feel right, And so, sort of the base level the basic example that I can give is gender roles and gender truths that are out there. It's like, we know what that is from scripture, from Genesis and the creation of the world and God creating them male and female. When someone doesn't have that worldview and they have the worldview that the genders are swappable and there's more than two and whatever. That comes through in the storytelling, and yet when that comes through in the storytelling, it rings hollow, it rings untrue because it's not really true about the world. So it's kind of a little bit of an off track, more so to say, the
Yeah.
better you know the scriptures, the better you know God, the better you know how he has created the world and set the world up with order and design, the better you'll be able to tell those stories. Because as a director, when I'm directing a scene, here's a little director tip for anybody interested in directing movies, and I'm watching the monitor, what I'm typically doing is I'm waiting to feel that whatever the scene is happening on the monitor and whatever the actor is doing draws me in. Because if they draw me in and I feel like I'm actually watching the movie and I'm feeling a connection, then that means it's something genuine that's coming through the monitor. There's a genuine performance on the other side. If I'm not feeling it, if they're not drawing me in, then okay, we need to redo it. We need to figure something out, right?
Yeah. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. Let me give you some notes or ideas or something. And so that's what it is. It's about the best movies are the ones that that feel real, that feel genuine. And I believe that that's because those often, and sometimes accidentally, sometimes filmmakers do it accidentally, manage to, kind of grasp a hold of a truth that's beyond us, right? Beyond my the whole like my truth thing that's kind of common right now. It's that truth that's beyond us, and that's something that God has established. So maybe a long-winded answer, but
well, no, I love that, and I'm just curious, how do you guys see this point in history where we're at currently? I mean, there's never been a time, in my opinion, more important to know truth, to be able to find truth. Truth is disappearing daily, basically, especially digitally. And so how is this an important time for that kind of a message to come through, especially in the church world, but just in general? Like, why is now a very, very critical time to lean into truth and to share that kind of message with others? Why is this for a church leader basically listening to this? What would you encourage them in kind of digging into that sort of urgently at this point?
Chris, I was gonna let you
jump in first. I've never been a pastor, but I think the Bible is just it's a story, right? And so with the way that we are consuming media, we have such an outlet and an avenue to be able to share stories, and people will eat them up, so to speak. And I think the way that Hollywood and how corrupt it's been, just sort of like they're trying to steer the ship and control what society thinks is normal, like, oh, you do you and your truth and all this malarkey and nonsense, literally the enemy at work, right? Trying to like force feed us. And then you have very few films that actually do a good job of like speaking the truth. And so, I think and with Angel Studios and some of the other bigger players, not that they're doing everything correctly. I don't think anyone can ever do anything perfectly anyways, but it's hard, right? Because it's challenging, but yet very cool to see like faith content actually being watched. And so again, that's where I go back to like, oh wow, this is a better time than ever. Like, this is a better time than ever, right? To actually get content out there, because everyone's a filmmaker because they have a camera in their pocket and they're telling their story. So I think the more that we can do about just sharing authentic stories, and obviously the only truth is the Bible, but like no one can take away things that you have personally gone through. And I think just sharing like what the Lord has done in my life, I mean, that helps other people because, and I was never one to like share anything, especially when it comes to like the Bible, because I'm like, oh, what if I don't know, right? I was fear man. And so I think just sharing it like, hey, it's not all like rainbows and cupcakes and, easy. We have to count the cost, and it's challenging, but it's so rewarding, like, to follow Jesus, because it's transformational from every aspect of my life, my family's, my kids. Like, it's really amazing to see. And I'm so like inspired by other Christian filmmakers, and especially like when you have like an entire Christian crew, that production is so different than anything ever I encountered in Hollywood. Because if you're surrounding yourselves with like-minded people, it's just the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit is like there. And like Doc Connor, not everyone was Christian followers, but they knew going in that it was a faith-based movie. And so that there was that backbone there, right? And so um I think the Lord's blessing will be all over the movie. And it's not necessarily just, it's not about like making money or, all these various things. It's about just spreading the love of Jesus, and, let the Lord just do with what he wants. Even if like one person comes to know Jesus because of this movie, then angels are rejoicing in heaven, right? And so I think you have to put yourself out there, and you have to do the work in order to, because if you just sit back and you hide, then what are you doing, right? And so you have to take the step. You have to step out in faith, to like Andy and Jay have done with this movie, and like putting so much time, effort, and resource into it, and they don't know what's going to happen with it. No one does, but the Lord does, right? And so, and just let the Lord's will be done, right? I think it's a daily surrender to like, Lord, just use me. Um, and yeah, so.
That's
And
good.
to kind of piggyback off of that with this particular time, and Chris kind of alluded to this, and I think no one will be shocked when I say this, but with kind of how corrupt Hollywood had become, being definitely even a part of the genesis of us even getting kind of into this space, I just look at this time that we're living in right now, and despite what you might think in terms of some of the cultural shifts that maybe have even occurred over the last year or so, I just think the reality is it's only going to get worse. Worse meaning that if you've got as I believe darker forces at work in the world attempting to undermine God's created order and God's plan for mankind. They don't, we don't put one movie out and they go, well, oh my goodness, that, we lost, time to close up shop. Because if you think about the dark forces of the world and the Prince of Darkness and the forces that are trying to sort of create chaos among creation, they didn't give up after Christ rose from the dead. So we can't pretend like we live in neutrality, or for the most part, especially maybe this is more for church leaders. Pretend that we can kind of just do the same things over and over and over again, and not recognize what's happening in the world, and how the lengths that the enemy is willing to go, especially when it comes to kids. And again, that's where our heart is going. Man, this isn't they want your kid to to listen to rock music and maybe smoke a cigarette. It's like they want their life, they want their soul, they want they want way more than you think they want. And so that can't be, again, I resonate with like, Lord of the Rings style movies and like epic adventures and stuff like that, going, man, where's our swords? Like we
Yes.
can't just sit and sing a song and think that's gonna do it. Like we gotta go to battle, on behalf of the King of Kings. Anyway, I think that's what this time is it's a time to sort of stop pretending that things will kind of settle down and sort of go back to the joke I kind of make is that, there's a lot of even Christians out there that their prayers that Disney will go back to the way Disney was. That's what they want. You know, Christians come by and build something new, and I just go, Disney's not going back. They're not going
No.
back to what it was. And even what it wasn't even necessarily right. It's like you thought it was neutral and it really wasn't, but
Yeah.
I get where you think it was. And so,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
it's time to kind of
yeah.
put that aside, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've even pulled Little Mermaid, another Peter Pan, like different movies they pulled just for politically correct or incorrectness now, and I'm like, yeah, Disney's it's
Yeah.
not coming back.
They're off the deep end.
Yeah. Okay. So, final question. A pastor listening to this wants to use video to communicate a core truth to their congregation, right? They're trying to learn about ways to use video, use story. What's the single best piece of advice that you guys give to church leaders at this point in using story to encourage their church, but also as a discipleship tool? How can they use story as a tool for that? And in this day and age, how can they use a digital story or a video to do that?
Yeah, I'll kick that off by just saying story, as Chris mentioned, the Bible is one big story, right? And we were communicated a lot of truth about God through story. And so really the reason you should do it is because that's how God did it. And he saw that being truths. And I think the reason God did that and the reason pastors should do it is stories can be much more memorable than say just like communicating a fact, right? It's like I can communicate a fact and I can be 100% right about that fact. And that fact can be a technically life-changing fact. And yet me telling you that versus me showing you a story of how that fact impacted a person's life or that how that person's life changed from one to the other. I mean, that's the power of testimony, right? It's why we love having testimonies that we share, is because it shows that power at work. And so that's obviously that's the motivation to do it. Is you should be leveraging that. And I know pastors, especially those who are trained, know that in terms of using illustrations and spoken word type things. What's so unique about the age we live in is the ability to use visuals and use screens and use technology to tell those stories or to communicate those stories. And so I even think, to be honest with you, like there's ways that a pastor can not be scared of necessarily even using something that's not necessarily Christian in communicating something, because I think that's possible as well. But at the same time, I do think that, and this is just, again, personal opinion, that the goal is always got to be that it's not just sort of a sort of spiritual platitude that you're trying to communicate to people, but it actually is a deep truth, because as I mentioned before, you can use a movie clip and you can try to tie that movie clip to something that you're trying to teach to people. But if in both instances, it's something that's sort of like surface level and doesn't go very deep, that's where it's gonna maybe fall short. That's where it's maybe gonna feel cheap. Versus if that thing you're trying to communicate is actually connected to a very deep understanding of who God is and what he's done, then that's where it becomes an incredibly powerful tool. And Chris said this, and I'll just echo it a little bit. And that is, ultimately it does take the work for you to be really engaged with the scriptures and really engaged with God and your walk with him, and then being willing to do the work to actually like find those things or create them yourself, because it's not going to come easy. That's ultimately kind of the best thing I could say, is it's not easy, but it's worth it. And I think that's probably what is true about so much of the Christian walk.
Yeah. Chris, for you in your experience with just all things digital and specifically video, like what would your advice or encouragement be to church leaders at this point, where they're trying to use stories to encourage and to disciple others? How would you what would you encourage them to do at this point in their church?
Yeah, so I think, like Andy said, the power of testimony is just, it's powerful, right? I mean, look at Jesus when he would go and he would heal, or he would, just perform these miracles, then that person would just go running off and say, oh my gosh, I can see, and all these things. And so, which would then in turn, it's like a ripple effect, right? And so it just spreads like wildfire. And so I think, obviously a congregation has members, right? People who are coming to the church. And so people have gone through stuff, and just sharing that, using like, hey, we're creating this series that we want to see how the Lord has impacted you. I mean, I know a lot of people are hesitant to share it, like much like I was, like in terms of sharing what's going on. But there are those who are bold and courageous enough to share. And so that's what the Lord calls us to do, right? And so yeah, story is king, right? And I think you can not make your church more relatable, but we relate, and we're all created equal, and so we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And seeing somebody else go through the same thing that I'm going through, it helps like give that affirmation from the Lord that you're not alone. Or hearing a miraculous healing, oh wow, my friend's struggling with that or whatever. Like, you just see real life miracles, real life transformations. It just helps strengthen and embolden your faith. And so if a church is communicating that via video, like from people like who are actually going to that church, it's just, oh wow, I want to go to a church, or that just strengthens the faith. And so yeah, I think again, with the media consumption and everything nowadays, I mean, for any church that's not creating media or sharing testimony, I mean, you can do graphically things too, but there is so much power in testimony and hearing it from someone's point of view and perspective, because they can't, like, you can't tell their story better than they can. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
I'll just add this real quick, is that just as a challenge for any pastors that are listening, and I'm happy to debate this with anybody, but I don't think anybody will debate me on it. I think the church and I think Christians should be the best storytellers out there, both with testimony and with fictional stories. The fact that we are letting, secular culture outpace us when it comes to getting real stories out there, and then also telling fictional stories is sort of, I mean, and I put myself in this camp too in terms of the criticism. It's our fault for sort of dropping the ball when it comes to being the ones who do it the best, and kind of letting sort of our interest in doing that wane, over the past several decades. We can go back, I'm sure, to a specific point in time, maybe where the church decided to kind of give up on the arts, in particular. But ultimately, I think the time and place that we're in, and I think most people sort of recognize this, is we need to be the best ones doing it, and we should be beating them at their own game. And I get challenged by that, or challenged meaning that excites me. It probably intimidates a lot of other people, but that's what I could say with confidence, that at least for in our part, what we're trying to do, which is be better than them at doing this. So.
Well, I mean, it's cool to see, because I feel like for the music industry, Christian music compared to secular music, like we're at a spot where Christian music has, maybe not the diversity that you have in secular music, but it has the quality, it has the amazing songs that are literally number one up there on the Billboard charts at this point. And currently you've got a few shows and series that are up there in Amazon Prime, like The Chosen, or others that are Christian entertainment. And so I think it's awesome that you guys are joining that rank of it's not quite there yet, but I think, yeah, as a Christian film industry and stuff like that. But I think obviously you guys are the leaders, part of the leadership in that space, and I think just the desire that you're sharing is all you need to continue in that. So I'm just thankful for you guys for putting stuff like this together, and really just providing something for a Christian audience. Let me just go on a quick lightning round here. And then we're done. Let's see here. Let me read through these questions and make sure they're not stupid. um, okay, here's one for Chris. All right, Chris, I got a quick lightning round question for you here. What is your creative kryptonite, and how do you get past it?
Oof. I think perfectionism. Because I will continue to tweak a scene until like it's go time. And so I think less is more, and I've tried to help myself understand like less is more. I don't have to make it perfect. And yeah, I think perfectionism is my like just making a scene look just perfect without any flaws. Because I even watch stuff like that I've done a couple years ago, and I'm like, oh, like that, did I do that? And so we could be our own worst critic. I think, yeah, just kind of like you have a job, right? Solving problems. That's a cinematographer. That's what you're supposed to do, solve problems, not create them. I mean, I create some. Sorry, Andy. I can solve them typically with the team around me. And so, yeah, I think perfectionism. Yeah.
That's good. All right, Andy, question for you. If you could only describe the Doc Connor movie in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Okay, only 3 words. Fun's definitely going to be one of them. It's a blast, right? So fun. So I would say suspenseful, for sure. A lot of twists and turns in this movie, like you want in any good kind of mystery adventure film. And then probably the last word I would use would be surprising. And here's what I mean by that in a different way than suspenseful. By surprising, and this was kind of obvious at our cast and crew red carpet premiere. You know, when you say it's a low budget Christian film, people have a particular thing in their mind. And then when they go in
right,
and see what we've presented, it almost is shocking.
You gotta stop telling people it's a low budget Christian film. Just let them have their...
There's nothing visually low budget about it. It's top notch visually. So I think you guys did a good job.
Well, and then from pretty much a lot of different aspects, I will push back on Chris a little bit. I love saying it's a low budget Christian film, and then having people see it and go, "Wait, what do you mean?" Because I do think that it's a bit of a myth that you have to spend like crazy amounts of money to create something meaningful. It's sort of like Chris said. And I was going to bring this up when you mentioned the camera systems. You know, it's kind of less actually about the high end, like expensive camera systems, and more like who's got their hands on it. Because I've seen plenty of stuff that's shot on high end stuff that looks terrible because, you know, it's the person behind the camera who kind of didn't know what they were doing. So anyway, I'm going to keep saying it's a low budget Christian film.
All right, stop it.
Okay, cool. For Chris, what's the most powerful story you've ever seen?
I think the most powerful story that I've ever seen, it's not because it's from a different reason, is Doc Connor, because it was powerful. And hold on, it was powerful because I got to sit in a movie theater with my kids and they got to see something that I worked on.
Dang.
That's cool.
That is, dude.
So
that's good. That's good.
I'm going to become the interviewer real quick, Chris, because what I'm curious about is if there's a movie that unlocked anything for you from a cinematography perspective. And let me give you an example. I've done a lot of graphic design, and I did a lot of graphic design when I was younger. Yeah. It wasn't until I worked at a print shop and then learned how to do vector imagery that completely changed how because I would do a lot of photo manipulation, work in Photoshop and do that kind of stuff. And then I learned Illustrator and vector art, and it completely changed me as a designer from top to bottom, because it just unlocked something for me that I didn't, to where I could create the high quality graphics that I was able to do then from that point on. So that's I can point to that and go, that unlocked something. So I mean, I'm wondering, I'm kind of curious for you, and maybe it's not a movie, maybe it's just something that sort of you go, oh, I can see the pivot in my cinematography
Yeah.
where something unlocked, like you mentioned, the like shooting from outside. It's like
Yeah.
that could have been just a trick that you picked up, but was there something like that that unlocked, your brain?
I mean, in terms of like unlocking, I think it's been a daily like process for me. Because I've been doing it for so long, like I think we could just as a like a more seasoned cinematographer, I think we can think that we know everything or that we're better than other people. And I think that that's where like that's the one great thing about like being uniquely made, right, in the image of God. And like if Andy hired another cinematographer to shoot his movie, would it be the exact same? No, it would have just a slightly different aesthetic or a look. And I think, obviously all these YouTubers and stuff like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, obviously, Roger Deakins, he's a great cinematographer, well known. He finally won for best cinematography, which is so well deserved. Like, any of his movies are great from like just a lighting perspective, and it's so crazy. Like for me, everything I feel like it's all subconscious just because I've been doing it for so long. Like, I don't think it just kind of like I just do it, and so it's like I don't know. It's weird. I don't know why I'm struggling to find the words, like, because it's all the Lord. It's all the Lord,
Yeah,
honestly. Like,
yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, let's maybe do two more questions. Let's see. All right, Andrew, this question's for you. Dream story. If budget, time, logistics were no object, what is the one story, biblical or not from the Bible, that you would love to tell as a movie?
Okay.
he's got one.
I have two.
Yeah.
I'm going to say two. And the first one will be a little short. What I will say to set this up is that I've been thinking a lot about biblical adaptation, like making a movie based on a story in the Bible. And I actually don't think there's many stories in the Bible that I'm starting to lean a little bit into. It's sort of a futile pursuit to try to go, oh, I'm going to make the Noah movie, or I'm going to make the Moses movie, or I'm going to make, and people have done versions of that. I mean, Ten Commandments is awesome. I think Prince of Egypt is one of the greatest movies ever, just regardless, so it's possible, but I think those movies are few and far between in terms of which ones work in a cinematic way. And so I think it's kind of it's if you think about, I'm so fascinated to see what Mel Gibson does with the Passion of the Christ, the Resurrection of the Christ. I mean, is what he's working on, because, and I trust him. I've heard him talk about that, trying to crack that. It's why it's taken so long. But how do you tell us 3-act cinematic story around the most impactful event ever in the history of humanity that didn't even just is an event that happened that you could tell a fact about, but has a ripple effect, millennia later, I mean, it's like you can't tell that as a story.
Well, and then you get all the Christians coming out of the woodwork. Oh, you did it wrong, or you cast this person as this. Like,
So I've definitely now sort of like gone, I like making sort of classic fictional, stories, right? And so Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite film of all time. I would love to do a Raiders of the Lost Ark-esque movie. That would be like a dream to be able to do. Like, I love biblical archaeology. I love that type of thing. So that's kind of there, and I have a story maybe around that. But so here's the product I'm going to hawk. I actually am also a novelist, and I wrote a book.
Oh.
So this is the novel. It's called Across to Kill.
Yep.
And it's a mystery action, or it's actually an action thriller novel is really what it is. I wrote it, and I can say this now because it's a trilogy of books and they're already out. I wrote it for dudes because I'm a guy and I love these types of things and wasn't fighting anything from a Christian perspective. The Christian fiction industry is not very receptive to writing books for dudes. So I had to say it wasn't that in the beginning. But this story is like, if you would imagine somebody like a Jason Bourne or a James Bond coming to Christ, what would that be like?
Wow. Okay.
And that's this story. And it's essentially, it's not a cheesy like, oh, James Bond comes to Christ and now he's a secret agent who loves Jesus. Like, it's not that at all. It's man, the guilt that guy would feel. And for the main
Mm.
character of my book, the pursuit of redemption for himself. I mean, it's a book about struggling with forgiveness over your past actions, because if you take a guy like that and have him receive Christ and all of a sudden look at his past and go, I've done awful things, what does that do to a person? And yet at the same
Right.
time, being a fan of, the Mission Impossible films, at the same time, he's a guy that's very talented in what he does. And so,
Mhm.
that life, he wants to desperately to escape that life, but that life, almost is not ready to let him do that. So, but it's first and foremost just a straight up like action thriller, very John Wick, very Mission Impossible, very James Bond. And it would take probably $30 million to turn this into a movie.
We
I
could
was
do
gonna
it for
ask.
15. We could do it for
I was
15.
I was gonna ask, is that gonna be the next one or what?
It can't be the next one, but that goes to my wife and I, as we sort of make these movies, we kind of, or do this thing, we kind of joke that like that'll be our peak if we're able to adapt that book into a movie, which is it's 100% adaptable into a movie, because I really write much more like a screenplay writer than I do. It's very I have a vivid imagination, so it's very visual in how I write. So it would be very probably easy to adapt. And at one time was almost adapted
Mm.
by a big studio. So
Wow.
different
Yeah.
story, but
Yeah.
definitely is something that that could go into that medium. And so, Tom Cruise just kind of wrapped up Mission Impossible. I'd like to come out with the next big action franchise.
There's room at the table now. Dude, that's so cool. Well, let me just ask you guys a final question, more on a spiritual note, but like, prayer, where does that fit in? Is as a critical piece for what you guys do, and how have you guys seen prayer um, make anything you do worth doing? How has it made it effective?
Well, I think obviously prayer has power, and prayer can change the atmosphere. And so I think, um, much like I do, I pray before coming on board any project, pray together with my wife, my kids. Prayer is something that um, we do all the time, and because it's how we communicate with the Lord. I mean, the Lord knows all things, but like it's how we can have that conversation. And yeah, it's just fully, and we can't even fully understand the power of prayer, but like through the years I've just seen it firsthand, how it can truly make a difference, for a film, for your own spiritual life, physical life, emotional life. Like it can really make a difference. And so I make it a key priority in my whole life and my whole being, like of who I am. Like prayer is like instrumental. And so any, especially faith-based project, should be just bathed in prayer, from the start to the end. Like it should just be covered in prayer, because it does make a difference for sure.
Andrew, how have you seen prayer just affect what you're doing?
Yeah, prayer. There's two aspects to prayer, both of which we've seen just in spades on this project, and really across sort of this whole journey. And that is the first sort of more obvious one is we're obviously praying for God to do things, right? Like we want Him to do it. And so you bring your requests to the Lord, right? And I think for a lot of people, we also, especially in church world, know when it comes to prayer and teach that, often that means God's going to, he's going to answer it, but he's going to answer it in his way. The other aspect of prayer that we have 100% seen through this process is prayer is for you to also shift your perspective towards God's. Because I'll go into prayer with my goals, and the prayer, then not only through the course of the prayer, but then how God answers the prayer changes my goals from what I want to what he wants.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of what it is too, because I can I've had those moments where I get frustrated with the Lord because he's not answering it the way that I want him to answer it, only to then turn around and have to seek forgiveness after seeing, oh, well, he answered it the way he wanted to, and it was better, And so, so the way that we have, gone through this has really shown a light on, God's going to answer it the way he wants to answer it. And that doesn't mean we stop praying. But at the same time, what that prayer is doing is changing our hearts, towards him and towards what he wants, and being okay if he's gonna, and to be honest with you, the way he has done this project is every single thing that has happened to get us to where we are today has happened at the 2 months after I wanted it, and which was where he wanted it. And I see why where he wanted it to happen that way was the right way. When I'm not getting it and I'm having to wait 2 months, it can be frustrating. But that has really been what has happened. And let me say this, because I think this could be really helpful, not just to the three of us here, but to your listeners as well. Because it's something that we've seen that has actually been really, really impactful, is we've included our kids in on these prayer requests and on talking about the way that the Lord answers those prayer requests. So in a sense too, and really we should probably do this even beyond that, because I'm thinking even now of, as Chris has mentioned, about bathing in a prayer and the crew being a part of this, is basically showing other people how, we're doing it with our kids because we're discipling our kids, but it's, hey, here's what the Lord's doing and here's how he is answering prayer. To do two things: to one, show you how he does answer prayer, and then on the other side of that, show you how, for this project in particular, anything that's going to be successful it's going to be, the best way it can go is to be successful in God's eyes, not successful in man's eyes. And so, to a degree, my wife and I keep talking about how, our prayer is that the Lord is glorified in this process, that this movie is about glorifying him, and that at the end of the day, he's going to get the credit. And as you walk through the path of us getting to the place where this movie now is going to come out in theaters, and with everything that's happened, the way that we've gone about it and the way it's happened, he has to take the credit for it, because there's no other way. Nobody can say that was me, on this thing.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
So he answered our prayer, right? And yet we're still human. And so we have to be like, well, that's what I'm praying for, and he's doing it. I'm still kind of mad that I had to wait, for the answer. So we're still human and still having to realign ourselves continually and not get frustrated when he does it his way, because it is so different from what we expect. But that's it. That's to me, as Chris mentioned, I think he said this earlier in a different answer, but if he's able to, we have the goals for ourselves and being able to meet financial obligations and all that kind of stuff, is completely fine. I mean, like, those things are things that he's led us to, and it's fine. But barring, being hugely successful with it in the world's eyes, if someone through the process or through the viewing of the movie is drawn closer to the Lord, hopefully even potentially someone who was far from him that then receives Christ, that's entirely worth it. And that's what he called us to do, and that's what we're doing. And so I'll add this kind of one last thing, just as, because I think prayer, everything we've been talking about with prayer is associated with this idea too, and that is, the thing that has kept me going in those months where he's not answering it maybe the way I wanted him to do it is, and the other thing that prayer and communion with God, I think, really ultimately takes a person, is understanding that, look, you're either going with him or you're not. And so, for us, we've been like, he's not maybe answered it the way we've wanted to, or we get frustrated in the process or whatever, but there's no other there's no other way to go. I mean, we're either going with him or we're not going with him. And so that's the other thing I think why prayer is important, is because it's that reminder that without him, the kingdoms fall. And so we need him. Uh, he didn't say it was going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's where prayer keeps us. Maybe to put it succinctly, prayer keeps us sane, and it keeps us aligned with him, and it keeps us from pulling our hair out. Because I'm a little older, but I still have pretty good hair. I think I'm even starting to do this little like Reed Richards thing going on here, and so
it looks
anyway.
good. It looks good. That's funny.
That's what prayer accomplishes. Maybe at the prayer levels, I still got a good head of hair.
I love it. Well, dude, thank you guys so much. I'm excited for everybody to see this movie. If you got families, especially, go see it. But I'm thankful for you guys' wisdom in this space. You guys are doing this every day as a job, and just the storytelling wisdom, that you guys have is key. So I'm just grateful for you guys. If people wanted to connect with you guys, just like on a more like social media basis, where would be the best way to go and connect with you guys individually? I'll post all the links for the movie down below, but where would you guys like to connect with people mostly?
I'm only on Facebook, so I had to
Okay.
get rid of it. It was just like social media taking too much time away from my family. So, and Instagram wasn't leading to any work, but Facebook does. So I'm only on Facebook. Just my name, Chris McKechnie. So
I'll vouch for Chris. If you follow Chris on Facebook, you'll be encouraged. So go follow Chris. How about you, Andrew?
Good. Yeah. So I kind of am all over the map on social media for my personal accounts. You probably won't see me posting very much, but Huff Media Pro is our handle on all social media and YouTube. And then for the movie, Webtective is the handle on all of the social media and YouTube, and .connor.com and huffmediapro.com. But that you can find us, and here's what I would encourage you, and I think Chris would say the exact same thing for himself, which is for pastors or for creatives, contact us, reach out. We try to put our contact information and put ways, DM. Honestly, one of our best friends now here in the Nashville area, who we love, got connected to us through the process of this movie from a Facebook DM.
Wow.
And that's it. Just taking the initiative to go, hey, I'm in the area and wanting to do faith-based media content and would love to meet you guys. Ends up, becoming one of the biggest supporters on the movie and playing a crew role, and
Wow.
a huge friend of ours that I know is going to continue to be a friend into the future, and a partner of ours in this process. And so we love it when people reach out to us. And I would even hopefully, let's just kind of laugh a little bit, and imagine .com becomes the one of the surprise hits of the year and makes all this money, and Chris and I are now household names, and and we drive around in limousines and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm sure that's the plan God has.
That's the plan.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That's we want to continue that, because again, I think I speak for Chris when I say it's a team effort, and it's meeting people, and it's engaging with people and going, oh, we're kind of aligned values wise, let's kind of work on this together. You have a skill set, I have a skill set, and I think that's what's needed in the creative world, especially when it comes to Christians, is that we continue to find each other and work together and meet each other and encourage each other. And you follow Chris and hear about all the crazy stuff that happens with his family and all that, and their schooling. So that's what we need. We don't want to ever become the people that you look at and you see doing big stuff and you have no chance of ever, having a conversation with them. So reach out to us, follow us, find us, talk to us. We want to get to know you.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much, you guys, for being on. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. See you guys.
All right, bye.
Bye.